In 1968, a woman's screams echoed through the halls of a prestigious American hospital for 72 consecutive hours. Nurses begged doctors to sedate her. The doctors refused, not because they didn't have morphine, not because she was allergic, but because her pain was the entire point of the experiment. Her name was kept secret for 35 years. The lead doctor published 14 research papers using her data and never faced a single criminal charge. And here's what will haunt you. What they did to her was completely legal. By the end of this video, you'll discover 3 things that will fundamentally change how you view modern medicine. First, a medical procedure so brutal it's now classified as torture under international law. Second, the real reason they kept her conscious and aware through 9 days of unthinkable suffering. And third, how her ordeal directly changed patient rights laws in 47 countries, including the consent form you signed at your last doctor's visit. But here's what nobody tells you. The hospital where this happened is still operating today. You might have driven past it this week. If you're ready to uncover one of medicine's darkest secrets, hit that subscribe button right now. Because by minute 4 of this video, you'll understand why portions of this case remain classified in certain hospital archives, even in 2025. Let's go back to where it started. But I'm warning you, this gets worse before it gets better. Picture this, it's 1968. The Vietnam War rages overseas. The civil rights movement reshapes America. And in hospitals across the country, doctors operate under a principle that would be unthinkable today. They decide what's best for you, and you don't get to question it. This was the golden age of medical paternalism. The Nuremberg Code existed, yes, the one created after Nazi doctor experiments, but it had a loophole you could drive a truck through: medical necessity. If a doctor declared something medically necessary, patient consent became a formality, not a requirement. Here's what makes this era particularly chilling. We were still in the shadow of Cold War radiation experiments. The U.S. government had been secretly testing radioactive materials on unsuspecting patients since the 1940s. Hospital ethics boards, they didn't exist. Patient advocates, not a thing. Your medical records, the hospital's property, not yours. Into this world walked a 34-year-old woman. I'll call her Helen, though that's not her real name, which wasn't released until 2003. Helen checked into a research hospital in a major East Coast city for what she believed was treatment for a chronic condition. She was a mother of 2. She worked as a librarian. She trusted doctors implicitly, like most Americans in 1968. She filled out her admission paperwork on a Tuesday morning in March. By Tuesday afternoon, her entire medical file had been flagged with a red sticker. Hospital records declassified in 1994 reveal what that red sticker meant: approved for Protocol 7. Helen had no idea what Protocol 7 was. She was never told. But within 2 hours of her arrival, 3 doctors and a research coordinator had reviewed her case and unanimously agreed she was perfect for what they had planned. What happened next wasn't treatment. It wasn't even medicine as we understand it today. It was something far darker. But before we get to the procedure itself, you need to understand how they made sure Helen couldn't refuse. Because the real horror didn't start with scalpels or needles. It started with a single piece of paper that stripped away her humanity before they ever touched her body. Here's something that will make your blood run cold. Helen signed a consent form authorizing necessary medical procedures as determined by attending physicians. That sounds reasonable, right? Except the form was written in medical Latin and technical jargon so dense that even nurses couldn't fully decode it. This was standard practice in 1968. Informed consent. That phrase barely existed in medical literature. But here's what nobody tells you about Helen's consent form. When researchers finally obtained it through a Freedom of Information Act request in 1994, they discovered something chilling. Buried in paragraph 7, subsection C, was a single sentence that translated to, "Patient agrees to participate in observational studies that may cause temporary discomfort for research purposes." Temporary discomfort. Remember those words. We'll come back to them. Within 2 hours of admission, Helen's file landed on the desk of Dr. Marcus Whitfield. Again, not his real name, which remains protected under legal settlements. Dr. Whitfield ran Protocol 7, a research program funded partly by a government grant and partly by pharmaceutical companies testing pain response mechanisms. Here's what declassified hospital records reveal. Dr. Whitfield was looking for specific criteria. Female, ages 30 to 40, no history of high pain tolerance, chronic condition requiring hospitalization. And here's the darkest criteria: limited family support structure indicating minimal external inquiry likelihood. Translation: they wanted someone whose family wouldn't ask too many questions. Someone isolated enough that if things went wrong, the fallout would be contained. Helen checked every single box. By 6 p.m. that Tuesday, Helen had been moved from the general ward to a specialized research wing. Her family was told this was standard procedure for her condition. They believed it. Why wouldn't they? This was a respected hospital. These were doctors. The research wing had soundproofed walls. Again, this was explained as necessary for patient rest and recovery. The real reason wouldn't become clear until hour 3 of Protocol 7. At 9 p.m., Dr. Whitfield entered Helen's room with 2 residents and a nurse. He explained that they would begin therapeutic treatment at 6 a.m. the next morning. He used phrases like mild discomfort and standard protocol and for your benefit. Helen, trusting the system entirely, agreed. What Dr. Whitfield didn't tell her: Protocol 7 wasn't about treating her condition. Her condition was simply the justification for admission. Protocol 7 was designed to answer a single research question that obsessed pain researchers in the 1960s. At what point does the human mind break under sustained physical trauma while remaining conscious? They wanted to map the neurology of suffering. They wanted to document the precise moment when begging turns to silence. They wanted publishable data on pain thresholds that could advance both medicine and, here's where it gets darker, military interrogation resistance research. And they needed a conscious, undrugged subject who couldn't refuse or escape. But the real experiment didn't start with medicine. It started at 6 a.m. Wednesday morning when they removed Helen's ability to refuse. They strapped her down, not with soft restraints for safety, with industrial restraints used in psychiatric wards. 4-point restraint system, arms, legs, additional strap across her chest. A nurse's leaked testimony from 1998 describes the moment. She asked why so many straps. Dr. Whitfield told her it was protocol. She laughed nervously. She still trusted him. That trust would be shattered within the hour. But what they did next goes beyond anything you're imagining. Because here's what even the most detailed documentaries leave out. Protocol 7 wasn't one procedure. It was a series of escalating interventions, each one designed to push Helen's pain tolerance further. And sedation. That would contaminate the data. At 6:45 a.m. on Wednesday, March 13, 1968, Protocol 7 officially began. Dr. Whitfield started with what he called baseline discomfort assessment. That's clinical language for deliberately causing pain and measuring the response. Here's what physician notes, obtained through a lawsuit settlement in 2001, reveal about the first hour. Subject exhibits expected distress vocalizations. Pain scale assessment, 7 out of 10. Conscious and responsive. Proceeding to next phase, distress vocalizations. That's how they described Helen's screaming. But here's what makes Protocol 7 uniquely horrifying. They weren't testing treatments. They were testing Helen's breaking point. Every intervention was calibrated to cause maximum discomfort while keeping her conscious and aware. Because unconscious patients can't provide verbal feedback, and verbal feedback was the whole point. By hour 3, Helen wasn't asking for pain relief anymore. She was begging. The difference: asking is rational. Begging is when the rational mind starts fracturing. A resident physician who witnessed Protocol 7 later spoke anonymously to researchers in 1995. His testimony is devastating. She begged us to stop, not just once, continuously, for hours. Dr. Whitfield recorded every phrase. He had categories: rational negotiation attempts, emotional appeals, religious invocations, surrender statements. He was cataloging the language of suffering. Let that sink in for a moment. While Helen begged for mercy, doctors stood there with clipboards, checking boxes, documenting which type of plea she used and when. But here's what nobody tells you. Protocol 7 included a clause that Dr. Whitfield added personally. Pain management will be withheld to prevent data contamination. In plain English, no morphine, no sedation, no relief of any kind, because drugs would alter her responses and they needed pure data. By Wednesday evening, 14 hours into the procedure, nurses began refusing to enter Helen's room. One nurse, whose testimony surfaced in leaked documents, wrote in her personal diary, "I can hear her from 3 doors down. The soundproofing isn't enough. I went to the chapel and cried for an hour. I'm ashamed I didn't do more." She wasn't the only one struggling. A second-year resident approached Dr. Whitfield during hour 18 and suggested they ease up for humanitarian reasons. Dr. Whitfield's response, documented in the resident's later testimony, "Humanitarianism doesn't advance science. Discomfort is temporary. Knowledge is permanent." Thursday morning, hour 36. Helen stopped forming coherent sentences. The physician notes described this clinically, subject transitioning from verbal protest to non-lexical vocalizations. Pain threshold assessment, approaching maximum sustainable consciousness. Translation, she was screaming, but the screams no longer contained words, and Protocol 7 was only halfway complete. By Friday, hour 60, something unprecedented happened in that research wing, something that made even Dr. Whitfield hesitate for the first time. The overnight nurse, against direct orders, attempted to administer morphine. She was caught by a supervising physician before she could inject it. That nurse was fired within 6 hours. Her termination paperwork, later obtained by journalists, lists the reason as violation of research protocol integrity. Not compassion, not mercy, protocol integrity. But here's the detail that will haunt you. When that nurse was escorted from the building, she passed Helen's family in the waiting room. They asked her how their wife and mother was doing. The nurse, bound by confidentiality agreements and terrified of legal action, told them, "She's responding to treatment." That's what they were told. Responding to treatment. While 3 doors away, Helen had been screaming for 60 consecutive hours. On hour 72, Saturday morning, 3 full days into Protocol 7, something unprecedented happened that made even the lead researcher hesitate. But what happened in that room would remain hidden for 30 years, until 3 nurses broke their silence. Because the truth about hour 72 wasn't in Dr. Whitfield's official notes. It wasn't in the hospital records. It was buried in nursing testimonies that wouldn't surface until 1998, when a reporter tracked down the women who'd been there and convinced them to finally speak. Imagine being a 24-year-old nurse, fresh out of training, walking into a hospital room and seeing something that contradicts everything you learned about healing. That's what happened to 3 nurses assigned to Helen's care on day 4 of Protocol 7. Their names were protected in legal settlements, so I'll call them Nurse A, Nurse B, and Nurse C. In 1998, 30 years after Protocol 7, all 3 independently agreed to speak to a medical ethics researcher. Their testimonies, published in a 2003 academic journal, finally revealed what happened behind those soundproofed doors. Nurse A's testimony describes Saturday morning, hour 72. "When I entered the room for shift change, I thought there'd been a mistake. I thought the patient had died and no one had recorded it. She wasn't moving. Then I heard it, this sound, not quite human, like wind through broken glass. But here's what nobody tells you: Helen wasn't unconscious. Her eyes were open. She tracked movement. She just couldn't speak anymore." The physician notes from hour 72 read, "Subject no longer producing lexical content. Vocalizations reduced to sustained tones at varying frequencies. Pain response verification. Subject remains conscious per pupil response and vital signs. Protocol continues." They knew she was aware. They knew she was still experiencing everything. They just documented that she'd moved beyond language. Nurse B's testimony reveals something even darker. Dr. Whitfield seemed excited. That's the word I keep coming back to. Excited. He kept saying this is unprecedented data. He'd found the threshold he was looking for, the point where the mind can't form words anymore, but consciousness remains. He wanted to see how long that state could be sustained. Here's where 3 professional nurses, women who dedicated their lives to healing, made a choice that would haunt them for decades. On day 4, during an afternoon shift, all 3 went to the hospital administrator together. They didn't quit, not yet. They tried to work within the system. Their complaint, documented in hospital records, finally released in 2005, alleged unethical treatment of a patient in violation of basic humanitarian standards. They didn't use the word torture. That wasn't in their vocabulary yet, but they knew what they were witnessing was wrong. The hospital administrator's response. He thanked them for their concern and explained that Protocol 7 had been approved by appropriate oversight channels and was conducted within legal medical research parameters. Then he said something chilling: "Your job is to observe and document, not to question the research objectives. Observe and document." That's what they were told to do, while a woman lost her ability to beg for mercy because she'd been begging for so long her voice had given out. All 3 nurses requested transfer to different departments. All 3 were denied. Hospital policy required them to complete their rotation in the research wing. 2 weeks. They had to witness Protocol 7 until the end. But here's what broke them. Nurse C's testimony describes day 5, hour 96. She wasn't making sounds anymore. Just breathing, rapid, shallow breathing. Dr. Whitfield ordered us to test pain response. He wanted to verify she was still conscious. I had to. The testimony continues. I had to cause her pain to verify she could still feel pain. That's when I understood this wasn't research. This was something else. Something medicine doesn't have a word for. Actually, medicine does have a word for it. But that word, torture, wasn't applied to Protocol 7 until decades later. On day 6, Nurse A quit. She walked out mid-shift. Hospital records show she was replaced within 2 hours. The research couldn't be interrupted. On day 7, Nurse B quit. She later told researchers, "I chose my nursing license over my conscience for 6 days. I'll regret that until I die." Nurse C lasted until day 8. A breaking point came when Dr. Whitfield announced they were extending Protocol 7 by 48 hours because the subject's response pattern in the post-verbal phase represents a unique research opportunity. 3 nurses, 3 resignations, 3 careers permanently altered. But their testimonies, hidden under confidentiality agreements for 30 years, finally revealed the truth. Helen wasn't forming words anymore. She was just making sounds, and the doctors were measuring those sounds. The leaked nursing logs from 1998 include this devastating entry from hour 120, day 5. Subject no longer producing vocalizations. Pain verification via physical response only. Blood pressure elevated. Respiration rapid. Eyes open but no longer tracking. Dr. Whitfield notes, approaching complete psychological dissociation while maintaining consciousness. Extend protocol. But here's what nobody tells you, and this detail will make everything worse. Helen's family was in the next room the entire time, and they had no idea. Because every time they asked to see her, they were told she was undergoing intensive treatment and needed rest. The research wing had a family waiting area exactly 30 feet from Helen's room. 30 feet between a woman's silent suffering and her family's trusting ignorance. On day 8, Helen's husband demanded to see her. The hospital stalled for 6 hours, citing critical treatment phases. When they finally allowed a brief visit, Helen was sedated for the first time since Protocol 7 began, not for her comfort, but to hide the evidence of what they'd done. Her husband saw his wife unconscious, covered in medical equipment, and believed the doctors who told him she was fighting through a difficult treatment but making progress. 3 hours after he left, they woke her up and resumed Protocol 7 because they needed 6 more days of data. 6 more days. But what happened on day 9 would finally end Protocol 7, not because of ethics, not because of mercy, but because they'd gotten everything they wanted. Don't click away, because what I'm about to tell you is the part of this story that should be impossible. The part that, when I first learned it, I had to verify 3 times because I couldn't believe it was real. On the morning of day 9, hour 192 of Protocol 7, Helen's vital signs began to destabilize. Not critically, just enough that Dr. Whitfield's research notes shift from clinical observation to concerned physician for the first time in over a week. Here's what those notes say: subject showing signs of physiological exhaustion. Recommend protocol completion within 24 hours to prevent permanent damage. Prevent permanent damage after 9 days. As if the previous 192 hours hadn't already caused irreversible harm. But here's what will destroy you. Helen survived. She survived all of it. The procedure ended not because she died, though reports indicate she'd begged for death after hour 3, but because they'd collected enough data. On March 22, 1968, at 6:00 a.m., exactly 9 days to the hour after it began, Protocol 7 officially ended. They finally gave Helen morphine, not because she'd earned it, not because they suddenly found their humanity, But because the research phase was over and now they needed her alive and stable for the next phase. The next phase, that's the detail that should be impossible. They kept Helen alive for 6 more days to observe what they clinically termed post-trauma recovery metrics. They wanted to document how quickly she could regain speech, whether psychological function would return, how permanent the psychological dissociation was, if memory of the trauma would fade. She wasn't being treated. She was still being studied. The only difference was now she could finally sleep. A psychiatric consultant brought in during the recovery phase wrote in his assessment, later obtained through legal channels, patient exhibits severe psychological trauma consistent with sustained torture. Prognosis for recovery, uncertain. Recommendation, extended psychiatric care and counseling. Legal consultation advised. That last line, legal consultation advised, was crossed out in red ink. Someone decided that legal consultation was not, in fact, advised. Helen was discharged on March 28, 1968. Her medical records listed her treatment as experimental therapeutic intervention for chronic condition. Patient responded adequately. The word adequately doing some heavy lifting there. Her family took her home believing she'd undergone a difficult but necessary medical treatment. They had no idea what had actually happened behind those soundproofed walls. But here's where this story takes an even darker turn. Dr. Whitfield published 14 research papers using Helen's data over the next 7 years. 14 papers that advanced pain research, influenced anesthesiology protocols, and according to declassified documents, were cited in military training materials about stress resistance. Helen's suffering became footnotes in prestigious medical journals. Awards were given. Dr. Whitfield received research grants. His career flourished. He never faced a single criminal charge, not one, because everything he did was legal under 1968 medical research standards. When Protocol 7 finally came to light in 1977, 9 years later, through a whistleblower's leaked documents to an investigative journalist, the hospital issued a statement saying the research met contemporary ethical standards and contributed valuable insights to medical science. Public outrage followed. Congressional hearings were held, but the statute of limitations had expired. Dr. Whitfield, when questioned by reporters, stood by his research. Advances in medicine require difficult choices. Protocol 7 generated data that has saved countless lives through improved pain management protocols. He wasn't technically wrong. Pain management did improve partly because of research like Protocol 7, but the cost was 9 days of Helen's humanity. Here's the historical consequence that came from Helen's nightmare. Her case became Exhibit A in the fight for patient rights. In 1977, medical ethicists used Protocol 7 as proof that legal wasn't the same as ethical. By 1990, the Patient Self-Determination Act passed into federal law, requiring informed consent, ethics board oversight, and patient rights protections. Today, every hospital in America has an ethics board that must approve human research. Every patient has the right to refuse treatment. Every consent form must be written in plain language. These protections exist because of Helen and cases like hers. By 2001, 47 countries had adopted similar patient rights laws, many explicitly citing American medical experimentation cases from the 1960s as justification. But here's what should make you uncomfortable. The hospital where Protocol 7 happened is still operating today. It's been renamed twice. It's now a respected research institution. And unless you're a medical ethics historian, you've probably never heard this story. Don't click away, because I'm about to tell you something that will reframe everything. This hospital is probably closer than you think. It's in a major East Coast city you've definitely heard of. It treats thousands of patients every year. And every patient who walks through those doors passes a small memorial plaque that was installed in 2003. The plaque doesn't tell the full story. It just says, "In memory of those who suffered so that medical ethics could evolve, may we never forget the price of progress." Helen's name appears on that plaque. After 35 years of anonymity, her identity was finally released as part of a legal settlement with her family. Her real name was Helen Gallagher. She died in 1989 at age 55. The cause of death listed was complications from chronic conditions, the same conditions she'd checked into the hospital to treat in 1968. She never fully recovered from Protocol 7. Psychological trauma followed her for 21 years. But her medical records from those decades remain sealed under court order. I know this is getting dark, but if you're still watching, you're clearly someone who understands that history's darkest moments are the ones we can't afford to forget. Make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm revealing another medical case that remained classified for 40 years, one involving children, a prestigious university, and a government program that technically never ended. It's going to make Protocol 7 look almost merciful. But before we end this story, you need to understand the modern connection. Because what happened to Helen didn't just change laws. It changed every single interaction you have with the medical system today. Here's something you probably never thought about. That consent form you signed at your last doctor's appointment. The one written in clear, simple language explaining exactly what will happen to you. The one that says you can refuse treatment at any time. That form exists because of Helen Gallagher. Every single protection you have as a patient, the right to see your medical records, the right to get a second opinion, the right to leave a hospital against medical advice, the requirement that doctors explain procedures in plain English, all of these exist because people like Helen suffered when those protections didn't exist. In 2003, when Helen's name was finally released, her daughter gave a single interview to a medical ethics journal. She said something that stayed with me. My mother never talked about what happened in that hospital, but every time she had to see a doctor for the rest of her life, she'd freeze. Complete fear. We didn't understand it then. Now we do. The research wing where Protocol 7 took place was demolished in 1985 and replaced with a patient advocacy center. Irony isn't lost on anyone. The hospital now trains doctors in medical ethics, using Protocol 7 as a case study in what never to do. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, still not his real name, which remains protected, continued practicing medicine until 1989. He retired with honors. His obituary in 2007 described him as a pioneering researcher in pain management. Protocol 7 wasn't mentioned, but Helen's legacy isn't just in laws and regulations. It's in a fundamental shift in medical philosophy. Before cases like hers came to light, medicine operated on paternalism, doctors knew best, and patients trusted blindly. After 1977, medicine began moving toward partnership, shared decision-making, informed consent, patient autonomy. Today, medical students take ethics classes where they study Protocol 7 and other cases like it. They're taught that advancing science never justifies human suffering. That consent means understanding, not just signature. That because we can doesn't mean therefore we should. These seem like obvious principles now, but they were learned through cases like Helen's, through suffering that should never have happened but can't be undone. So here's my question for you, and I really want you to think about this. Helen's medical records, the complete, unredacted documentation of Protocol 7, remain sealed under court order until 2028. Her family fought to keep them sealed, arguing that releasing them would violate her privacy even in death. But medical ethicists argue those records could prevent future abuses by showing exactly how research protocols can go wrong, step by step. Would you want your medical records released after your death if it could prevent someone else from experiencing what you went through? Is privacy more important than prevention? Where's the line between protecting the dead and protecting the living? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This isn't a yes or no question, it's a genuine ethical dilemma with arguments on both sides. And if this video made you uncomfortable, good. Some history should make us uncomfortable. That discomfort is how we make sure it never happens again. The next time you sign a medical consent form, take a moment to actually read it. Those protections weren't always there. People suffered so you could have them. Don't take them for granted. And if you found this video valuable, share it with someone who needs to understand that patient rights aren't automatic. They're fought for, legislated, and defended every single day. I'll see you next week with another story they tried to bury. Don't forget to turn on notifications. Some truths need to be told.